Ah, all right.
I'm trying to get some more light in my face.
Let's see.
There we go.
All right. All right. Hey there, party people. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another edition of the beautiful Weirdo Life, where we learn instruction from everyday people having everyday experiences. Thank you for joining again. Happy Monday and all that good stuff. I'm excited about today's show. If this is your first time tuning in, be sure to save it to your timeline just in case you need to pop off and pop back in because adulting stuff happens. Also, share it with your friends. We want you to be a part of this dialogue, a part of this conversation. Act like we're sitting in your living room and we're just having a conversation. So feel free to chime in, leave comments, all that good stuff so we can get this show started. So last week, what did we talk about? We talked about code switching last week, and we've talked about what? Sex, past relationships, women and men stuff, all that good stuff. But tonight, everybody say tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about fatherhood and all things fatherhood. Like if things, roles have changed, do we need to go back to the past? How should we move forward? And we have a special guest, Dr. Philosopher, educator, poet, Renaissance man. And the list goes on and on and on. I'm going to bring him on. Mr. Olu Burrell, let's bring you on. Let's see here. Split screen. I'm clicking my source. Let me just make sure. I think everybody can see you. Can they see you?
Oh, can they?
Yes.
Hey, everybody.
There we go. So yes, everybody can see you now. You are on, and it's time to get the show on the road. So can you just introduce yourself and just say how you're a professor, you're a writer, a researcher, a poet, a Howard grad, a everything, a wordsmith that will slay you with words, and then you won't even know you've been cut.
I think you put a lot on it. I think you're gonna prime everybody for something amazing, and I don't know if I can deliver, but we'll see. I don't know if there's anything else I can add to what you already said. Although I will put doctor around quotation marks. There are plenty of people out there who have earned their stripes.
Yes.
I have not as of yet. I will claim that for some time in the future.
Yes.
So if there are any benefactors out there who are looking for somebody to benefit,
Yes.
you can donate to the Save the Olu Fund. I appreciate. There's only one of me.
Exactly. Put that right in there.
What else is going to be? No, but yeah, everything that you said. Writer, poet, educator, coach, organization development consultant, husband and father. Those are my most important roles.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pioneer. Yeah. You forgot chef. I'm still waiting on.
Oh yeah.
I'm still waiting on that date.
Yeah. Amateur gourmand.
Yes.
Yeah, we're definitely way past due for that. So we'll definitely talk about that offline. But I got you.
Yes. So let's get right into this because today's show is to talk about fatherhood, and I thought of you for this because I read your article about fatherhood, and it brought up so many different factors that I think that people don't talk on. One of the things that stuck out for me was you talked about raising your children in which you have, as my mother would say, the best of both worlds, a girl and a boy.
Yeah.
And you talked about how, and you can always correct me if I'm wrong because I'm trying to remember the article, but you talked about how people will come to you and there will be differences in the way they would think that you would raise your son and your daughter in terms of, I guess, exhibiting emotion and things of that nature. Can you speak of that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think, so, one of the things, to your point, what you just said, I did get a lot of people come to me like, oh, you got your boy now.
Uh-huh.
What you about to do now? Like, this is it. And I'm like, I do have my son. He's here, and I'm extremely happy. And I think there was a lot of assumptions based upon how society kind of frames gender roles and the like, as to there was an unspoken expectation as to now I'm satisfied,
Mm-hmm.
now I'm happy, now I'm fulfilled, now my name will live on. And I think those assumptions could be kind of dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
especially since if I didn't have a son and I only had a daughter, then would the opposite be true?
Right.
Am I not whole? Am I not complete? Do I not feel fulfilled? So I tend to push back on a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because first of all, I don't think it's healthy. I think it's something that's learned. I think it's something that people have passed down from generation to generation as far as that what those expectations are. But I don't think they serve us very well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's me, and that's my take on that.
What makes you say they don't
Yeah,
serve us well?
because I think so. I have this thing that I say a lot, especially when I'm coaching clients and the like. I tell them to CYA, but CYA is not necessarily what you think, but it is what you think. It's to challenge your assumptions,
Right.
right? And we all have these stories that we tell ourselves. We exist within them. We embody them. They've been
Mm-hmm.
told to us. Some that we choose, some that we have thrust upon us. But when you get to a point, we're all sentient human beings. When you get to a point where you're in the mode where you can choose for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to question those things that are just kind of like this is the way it should be,
Right.
right? So the should is always like nah, because
Mm-hmm.
the should means I'm somewhat beholden to it, and so um, especially as it pertains to what the expectations of me as a father would be that I'm raising a boy, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to um, my the expectations of what it would be like for me to raise my daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's the everything, just throw all the stereotypes out there. Oh, you gotta get your shotgun. Like that's what I got
Shotgun.
when my daughter was
Check.
born. So get your shotgun, which I would say I don't really like the whole shotgun thing.
Mm-hmm.
I do see myself fashioning a guillotine of some sort because I'm gonna get medieval on these suckers. But that's neither here nor there. Um, I'm chopping some watermelon in the back. You want some? So I've already envisioned what that conversation would look like
Right.
with any would-be suitors. But I mean, but that all that aside, it's really like for me, it's like, okay, how does this serve me? And I'll give you an example. Um, the stories that we tell ourselves
Mm-hmm.
often serve us, especially from stereotypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and words have so much power, which is why my company is called Spoken For Solutions. It's all about the power of words, and of course, me being a spoken word artist. But when people come up to you and they don't even think, they just say it. Like I've heard so many times, oh, there's no way you can deny that that's your child,
Right.
right? But think about the
What you're
implications behind
saying.
that saying, yeah. And so it's like, why would I? And it's like, well, you know how guys can be, and I'm like, tell me, tell me about the stereotype that you've
Mm-hmm.
now overlaid upon my human being, my person, and the assumption that you're making by saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tend to be a person that kind of gives pause when things like that happen because I really want to be intentional about my word choice and my word usage as much as I can. I mean, I'm human
Mm-hmm.
like anyone else, but when I have a choice in the matter, which is admittedly all the time, I try to be a little bit more intentional about that. So,
I
yeah,
think that what you bring up, though, some of those comments, I think they're rooted in, like when I was studying a little bit for our conversation, and I was looking at, okay, well, how did fatherhood start back in the day? What was the ideas around
yeah,
fatherhood? And back in those days, well, I was born in 80, so, and even before that time, back in those days, fatherhood
so,
was just like thought of as I'm the provider, you know,
yeah,
as far
yeah,
as like, and just providing like physically, not necessarily the emotional
yeah,
piece. It's like, oh,
yeah,
that's the woman's job. You take care of that piece.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
men, back in those days, they would say, I can't remember the saying my grandmother or my mother, or well, they would say that when you have a child, the guy like gets to decide whether they can stick around. But the woman, once you have a child, they're yours forever. But I
That's
can't remember. There's some like little nifty saying.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Mama's baby, daddy's maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
know. I don't. I mean, I'm just sifting through the stereotypical things there. Well, to your point, same. I was born in 1980 as well, and I think the way that I parent, the way that I'm choosing to parent,
Mm-hmm.
uh, for the most part, looks different from how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, of course, they're totally different dynamics. I'm
Mm-hmm.
raising my children in the 21st century. I'm one of eight. So my parents had eight of us. I'm the third oldest, and
Wowzers.
my
Shout
dad
outs to
was,
your parents. Fist pound.
yeah, shout
Boom.
out, yeah, my parents are incredible, and I
Mm-hmm.
love them dearly. And they teach me so much. And all at the same time, which is what I referenced in the article that you mentioned, like I'm wired completely differently than my father,
Right.
and so I'm also a Myers-Briggs type indicator certified practitioner, and we our MBTI types are completely different.
Right.
I'm an ENFP, extroverted, intuition, feeling, and perception. My dad is an ISTJ, so he's
Mm-hmm.
introverted, sensory. I'm trying to remember what the T is. Okay, it's pressure. I'm letting it go. Thinking, and judgment. There we go. See, back on track. You could probably tell that I started because I love to think. But understanding that and understanding that differences doesn't mean that somebody wins, somebody loses,
Right.
or that somebody's right, somebody's wrong. Gives me a little bit of space to kind of move and choose for myself, because it doesn't mean that not doing things the way that my father did or that my parents did means that I'm doing it wrong. It's just
Okay.
a difference. And I think allowing for nuance and allowing for moving about in this space of the gray instead of thinking of everything as a zero sum game or black and white
Mm-hmm.
allows me, at least speaking only for me, to kind of um, focus my trajectory a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's helpful.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so too. I think I really enjoyed when you mentioned how um, your father. There was something that you said, and I can't recall it straight from memory, but your
Mhm.
father would go to the degree that he could
Yeah.
in terms of his emotional capacity.
Yeah.
And how do you feel like that's affecting your parenting style now?
So, and this is one of those things where I'll have to look it up probably after this conversation and make sure I can cite it for you properly.
Mm-hmm.
There's I believe it's called the happiness equation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it says something like 50% of our capacity for happiness comes from um, what's passed down hereditarily.
Yes. Yes.
40% is situational, our choice.
Mm-hmm.
No, sorry, 40% is our choice and 10% is situational.
Okay.
And so I have to believe that, I have, um, there's a phalanx of ancestors who are impacting my
Mm-hmm.
ability based upon their lived experiences
Right.
that impacts my ability to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
I have to believe that I've inherited more than just that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If happiness is there, there's a whole lot of other stuff.
Right.
There's predilections. I mean, whenever you see pictures of people and they'll say, "Hell, here's a picture." Like today, Veterans Day, we're honoring our veterans.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people post pictures of their great great uncles who
Mm-hmm.
served in World War I, and they look exactly like them.
Yes.
You know
That's
what I
so
mean? It's like
crazy.
how so and it's like you look exactly like them, and it's
Right.
like what else did we receive,
Mm-hmm.
and how are we allowing that, or unbeknownst to us, how are we living that? How
Mm-hmm.
is that showing up in the way that we act, in the way that we think, in the way that we move, in the way that we love, in the way that we believe? There's just other stuff that's there, and so my father is a proud fourth generation Washingtonian.
Right.
Grew up in southeast,
Southeast.
here in
Ooh,
DC. Yeah, my dad is such a he's such a I genuinely love my father. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's a chaplain at Howard University,
Okay.
right? And so he's been a follower of Christ, missionary, which is how I got my name. He's Eugene Earl Burrell Sr.
Mm-hmm.
Um, chaplain, but he's also a black belt in judo, and he used to box, and he's from Southeast. Like, so he's like not a person that you get it twisted. So he's
Right.
like, I love Jesus, and you can
Right.
catch these hands and these feet
And he's
and
food.
everything else in between them. You know what I mean? So and he's also my dad. He's diminutive in stature.
Right.
He's 5'5.5", but people ain't mess with him. His
Right.
nickname was Baby Bull. He got kicked out of Baloo, had to go to Central finish high school because he fought so much. But now he loves God, but it's still in him, right? So I say all that to say there's stuff that he has, and his temperament is a little bit different than mine.
Mm-hmm.
But I realize that the way that I show up, it might be something that other people who might know my dad better, who say, I recognize something
In you.
in you at your age
Mm-hmm.
that your dad also had, or that your grandfather on your mother's side or your dad's side, or however that looks like. And so for me, it's a matter of saying, how do I, and I'm repeating myself slightly here, but how do I allow for this space for those things to kind of enter and then be conscientious about how I then show up
Right.
um, to my wife, to my friends, to
Mm-hmm.
my kids, and to strangers I meet on the street, and what
Mm-hmm.
might that look like? So that's yeah. So that capacity thing and what we inherit,
Mm-hmm.
that's the stuff that comes through.
Do
So
you feel like it's like a tug of war sometimes though? Because
oh, absolutely.
I feel
I'm sorry.
like I didn't grow up with my father, and I think he passed in 2006 or something like that. So I never had a relationship with him, but I did have the opportunity to have a relationship with my godfather who like stepped
Okay.
in. And I
Okay.
think there's even just with parents, there's this tug of war where they teach you certain things, and then it can be right or it could be
Yeah.
good, but it could also be better.
Yeah.
So it's the tug of war
Yeah.
of sometimes choosing what to
Yeah.
keep that your father has instilled
Yeah.
in you, or trying to make a difference in like, oh, this was good, but this could have been a little bit better, or trying to
Yeah.
the piece of yourself that you are without kind of like denying your father, or if that makes any.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. One of the things my dad used to say all the time, he said a lot of our issues and hangups
Mm-hmm.
are due to one of two things: not receiving enough of a good thing or receiving too much of a bad thing,
Uh-huh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And when those happen during our formative years, between the ages of 4 and actually until our brain stops growing, which I think is like 24.
Right.
So we like between that time, like those stories that we hear and absorb and tell
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and keep reiterating are things that affect us even when we're old and in our 40s and 50s. It's like
Mm-hmm.
there might be part of us that still has that same has those same thinking, that same way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I was going to say something else. I think I lost my train of thought here. But when you made mention of what you received from your godfather
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't receive from your dad, I think that's also I think that's key because
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes there's this mysticism around the present black father, right? Like if you are in the home,
Right.
everything will work out. And it's like, no, it's a little bit more complicated than
A
that.
little more
It's a little bit more
complex.
involved, right? Like
Right.
you can't just be like, oh, I'm present. I pick them up, I drop them off, I make sure that they got clothes on their back and food in their bellies, and
Mm-hmm.
try to treat their mama right, and take
Mm-hmm.
them to church. And it's like, okay, as you're checking off this checklist,
Mm-hmm.
what else could you be doing? And it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm still learning every day. And again, there are things that I do that I don't know why I do them.
Right.
And so I have to intentionally say, I'm going to make a choice to be conscious and present
And to do it differently.
here. Yes. And so that's the constant tug of
Mm-hmm.
war that it sometimes goes on, at least within me. So,
Right. And I think that I think that's one of the major changes from how fathers were back in the 80s and before into fathers in a millennial. In a
Yeah,
millennium, there's a difference. Like fatherhood is not just narrowed down to providing. Like there's
yeah,
also included in that the emotional support and having emotional intelligence to not just
yeah,
give your son or your daughter stuff, but to actually be
yeah,
there to build them as a person, their character and stuff like that. And I think that's been a transition because before I think that was looked at as you would be soft. You're
yeah,
supposed to leave that for the women. Like it's not so segmented now,
yeah.
which I love,
I agree.
by the way.
Yes, I'm so I'm such a fan of that. I mean, even like back when I was an undergrad at Howard, and I was I did the poetry, and most of my poetry was as is love poetry, and I was just committed to that. Like that's me. I don't have any problem writing about love and being romantic. That was a part of my value system. I didn't realize until later on how many people like didn't like that about me for a while. Like I would see there would be guys who would be like, "Hey man, I just gotta be honest with you. I used to hate on you so much back when we was in school. Man, I used to hate on you so bad. But you know what? I had to respect you after a while." And I was like, "Huh? Okay, cool. Okay." And so there's
Right,
all right. I didn't realize it, but it's also like that search and um that longing for authenticity, for
right,
being who you are meant to be, and to try to find your way and carve your niche in this world when you so desperately trying to make you a carbon copy of everything else.
right,
So much that wants to put you in a box and wants to be able to label you and wants to be able to
right,
say, you got to be this, right?
right. Or you got to do it
But
this
it,
way.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think of uh, Albert Einstein, who said that common sense is a collection of stereotypes that we collect by the time we turn 18,
Right,
right? And so, with stereotypes are just stories about things that we say about different things.
right,
Okay, if I get into an argument with you and you raise your volume a little bit, I'm gonna be like, you know what? She's an angry black woman.
right,
She's not gonna listen, and then I
right,
can dismiss you
right,
because I just put you in a. I can now fight it
right.
because that's the thing too. When we get stressed or angry or frustrated or upset, we rely on those stereotypes because our minds don't want to do the work of trying to find nuance,
Right,
right? They don't want to say, maybe she has a point,
right,
maybe you're seeing things differently, maybe it's not that you fundamentally disagree, maybe you're just saying the same thing differently,
right.
right? That takes a lot. It takes a lot of
That's work.
self. Yes, yes, absolutely. So yeah, so when we talk about what roles am I supposed to play or that's expected of me, and I mean I definitely see, and going back to your tug of war analogy, like there are things where I'm realizing, okay, I don't have to question every single thing. There's value
Right.
in some of the things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Case in point, there was a young man at my daughter's school who thought it was okay to put his hands on my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
to hit her and kick her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had to choose how I would show up to the
Oh,
school,
that was a choice.
um, and I had to choose the tone I would use,
Mm-hmm.
to choose how I would address it, and to also say, this, if it rises to the level of me having to speak to his parents or the principal, or what might that look like?
Okay.
And so I did have to, my daughter was just like, Daddy, he did it again. Can you go talk to him? And I'm like, what am
Right.
I supposed to do? Actually, no, what we have to do is we have to realize that, nah. I had to walk
You
away
handle
and said,
that.
no, I did it, but I did it very, I was very even keeled, I think. And I just said, my daughter's brought it to my attention that you think it's okay for you to put your hands and feet on her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to tell you that it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like for you not to do that again. I'd like to not have this conversation with you again. Is that okay? I was like, so what are you going to do now? Are you going to apologize to my daughter? I
Right.
did lead him in that. He's like, yes. I was like, I'll bring her over and make sure you do that, okay? And I brought her over and he apologized. I was just like, thank you. I hope the next time that I see you, I'm able to smile because I won't be able to do that right now. But you understand that, right? Okay. And then I had to,
He
yeah,
probably was scared for his life.
he
Okay.
probably was. He probably was. Because I did get down on his level. I just kind of, and I wasn't sinister, but I just wanted to be firm. And I
Right.
wanted him to know I'm not playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I also thought about the story that he would then tell, that he
Right.
chose to tell us. Well, he came and he said, what did he say? He said that I shouldn't hit his daughter again. Who's going to argue with that?
Right. Exactly.
But if I had gone up there with a different
Right.
side,
It could have been
right,
something.
it could have been something else. Right. So, yeah.
So, what do you
So,
think
yeah.
society's opinion, or what do you think their idea of fathers are today? Do you think it's changed? Like, what do you think societal's definition of fatherhood is? Or do you think there's still that expectation for fathers not to be involved?
I, well, so I will tell you what I hope it is.
Okay.
Right. I hope that I hope that there is space for people to view fatherhood where in which we are involved.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that we are not defaulting to stereotypes of what, especially in the Black community, about what fatherhood looks like, how it appears,
Mm-hmm.
um, um, activism versus present, and what that looks like, and everything that entails. I'm hoping that because I can tell you this, and this is just from the fathers that I know, like my very good friends and family members. I don't know a father that's not present in his child's life, and I'm happy to say that I don't. At least I don't associate with anyone who doesn't. And I don't know whether that might be a choice that I'm making consciously or unconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that I can say that safely about my circle of friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know that we're trying. I have a really good friend of mine who said one time a couple of years ago, he was just like, man, I don't know. He was like, I love hugging and kissing on my son, man. And I don't know I'm supposed to stop doing it because people are not supposed to be doing that. But like, no, I'm gonna do that for as long as I can. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right because I do the same thing with my son.
Mm-hmm.
Solomon will get all this love. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's just what it is. And because I don't want him. And then when we get into the whole toxic masculinity conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole what might that say about you and the inherent I don't want to say even inherent, the learned behavior around what it might mean to me in the way that I show up in my sexuality if
Mm-hmm.
I am too affectionate.
Mm-hmm.
And what might that mean and how might people view me? It's just like you're living your life kind of dodge these things.
Right.
I don't want to come off like this. I want to come off I'm like, what happened to just being authentic
Right.
and leaning into the positive of it and leaning into the fact that it's like, look, I want my son to have healthy relationships with men
Mm-hmm.
and women,
Mm-hmm.
and and I sit on a board of an organization, and where we talk about healthy masculinity. I sit
Right.
on the board of an organization called Men Can Stop Rape, and it's all about how do we change the narrative of what people think a real man is,
Right.
and how can we be allies to our sisters, and how can we be better behaved, and how can we put the positive peer pressure on our brothers,
Right.
um, and also to those who are non-gender conforming, and just being open and accepting to all those types of people. Because if we don't learn how to do it, we're going to forever be making mistakes and being disingenuous and
Mm-hmm.
falling flat on our faces and offending people. And it's just like, just learning to be aware of that.
Right. How do
That's
you,
the type of kids I want to have and how I want to be. So, sorry, go ahead.
and just being free to, give the love without the fear. I think that's when
Yeah.
you operate in fear. You're not going to give them this kind of love because you think they're going to turn out this
Yeah.
way or what have you. When they may very
Yeah.
well need more kisses
Wow.
and more hugs, but because you're, parenting through fear, that's something that I still, excuse me, struggle with. To like you try to protect your children, but then you realize like some things that you're doing is because of fear of you don't want them to experience the same things that you did. But it's like
Yeah.
it's like a balance that you gotta navigate. That's the only way that I can
Yeah.
put it. But one other,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about women and fathers, especially
Okay.
single women and fathers,
Oh,
and how it affects sons. Lord!
man.
And do,
Yeah.
like, men and women, when they have children, ideally they should work together. However,
Yeah.
that doesn't
For sure.
always pan out.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes a disruption in that relationship, sometimes the woman can just take away the man's masculinity and create these ideas of,
Yeah.
or perpetuate these ideas that men aren't fathers and all that. So, how can, what can be done about this? That's a big plight.
Yeah. Right. I would. So, and this is where I'm gonna. This is where I'm gonna kind of. It's gonna. It might seem like I'm retreating away from it, but I'm not, and I'll tell you why. So I believe that questions are sometimes more valuable than answers are.
Okay.
I believe that the questions that we ask can reveal a whole lot more than the answers that we give. And I,
Mm-hmm.
for one, don't claim to have all the answers because I think it's fully possible for a man who was raised by a woman to grow up to be a healthy, loving, secure man,
Mm-hmm.
right? I do think that there's benefit
Mm-hmm.
to having two parents in the home,
Oh.
and that also includes people, especially if you have parents who identify as homosexual or
Mm-hmm.
lesbian or the like. I'm just saying having that balance
Mm-hmm.
of having those perspectives, I think fares better. But I guess the question is it possible for you to have a single mother
Mm-hmm.
and to raise a healthy, aware son? And I don't think anybody would say, no, it's okay. So if it's possible, yes. Is it preferable? It can often depend on the situation.
Okay.
Um, I have a few single women friends who are raising children for the most part by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
which the father may not be the best role model for their children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would never go to them and be like, you know what you should be doing, right? Like, there's just no way
Right.
that that's even, because you don't know what that struggle is. I think that, um, and I'm conscious of the fact that I'm struggling to try to put this as succinctly as possible, but
Mm-hmm.
it's coming from a good place, I assure you. There's the belief that you need both in order to churn out healthy,
Mm-hmm.
aware,
To be the most healthiest.
self-actualizing. Yeah.
Right.
I think that statistically you would probably get a greater percentage of people who do, but
Mm-hmm.
I think there are anomalies in any category
Mm-hmm.
you could possibly come up with. Like, I know some really strong, really aware
Mm-hmm.
men who have only been raised by women.
Mm-hmm.
Same with women, and so can you be a man if you're not exposed to a healthy relationship with adult men in your life? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that should be intentionally focused on, or is that the way we should be going? I don't know, because I don't really want to pass judgment. It feels
Right.
too much of it. I think um, I believe that my children will fare better having me in their life,
Mm-hmm.
and I think because I think I try to set as much as possible the best example that I can.
Right.
Um, and I'm quick to apologize to my kids if I say or do something that goes beyond what my intention is,
Right.
especially if I say or do something to my wife that they bear witness to. I mean, I really just want to be like, I want you to understand, Daddy's human, Daddy makes mistakes,
It's
and I'm
important.
sorry that you had to see that. Yeah, it is, and I think some people, and I kind of grew up in the, in the era where it's like, nah, adults don't apologize to kids.
Because adults
You know
rule.
what I mean?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's like, it's right, But when I grew up, I'm like, there was a whole lot of stuff that was wrong. I used to think everything was right. It's like, no, this wasn't right at all. But I can do that without judgment.
Right.
It's a different era, you know. And one of the questions that I often ask myself, especially if I'm like consulting with organizations and bringing teams in,
Mm-hmm.
um, I ask one poignant question: what are you doing that um, that was that helped at one time but no longer serves you?
But people don't evaluate that. They just get grandfathered into the same stuff.
You always have to question, always have to challenge your assumptions. I don't think you grow if you don't. If you don't examine those things and say, you know what, that worked very well for the time that it was effective. And I think that's what you have to do when you're getting in. And I'm going to start talking about succession planning and all this other stuff, but I'm not going to go there.
Right.
But it really is a matter of saying, okay, like if I came up to you, if before we had this conversation today, I
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, look out because I'm going to send you something in the mail, you're going to be like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And then you open up the package and it's an America Online disc
Mm-hmm.
that will help you hit that dial up real quick. You're going to look at me like,
What in the
what are, what are we
world?
what are we doing? I'm like, but it works. It gets you online. And you like, we don't need to do it that way
Anymore.
anymore.
Right.
But it still works. Like it would be silly.
Right.
And like you would be like, why are we having this conversation? But there's so many of our habits, so many things that we've learned that we don't even question.
Right.
And I'm like, if it's a little bit archaic, it might serve as well to evaluate whether it's something we need to continue doing.
So I think, yeah,
That's just my thought.
that's very, very, very important. That's just not just parenting. That's just life. That's relationships. That's
Yeah,
friendships. That's just
yeah,
evolution, like evolving and
yeah,
cutting away pieces that you may not need, or what serves you
yeah,
then may not serve you now. Like one of the things,
yeah.
or the hardest things, that's the most difficult for me being a parent is I'm a person who likes equality in the same thing for everybody. Everybody does the same thing, and I realized that with children,
Yeah,
you got to be flexible. And sometimes my
yeah,
brain does not want to be.
yeah,
Sometimes my brain don't want to be flexible. It wants to go into, you
yeah,
want to group things. It's easier to group things. But
yeah,
then your children are individuals. So some person may need more of this and less of that. So it's doing
yeah,
navigating all of those things.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's real. To your point, I think there are conversations to be had about where nuance is present and the difference between being fair and being equitable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so being fair means treating people based upon what they need. Being equitable is treating everybody the same. And I think that if we get caught up in trying to make sure that everybody gets the exact same thing, it's kind of like if, we send our kids to school.
Mm-hmm.
If my kid is advanced, if they finish before everybody else, I don't want them twiddling their thumbs. I want the teacher to adjust their lessons to make sure they're continuing to be challenged.
Right.
Because we want that, and so I see that as something that we need to be a little bit more, like I'm trying to be more aware of, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like the same thing. I also see that nuance present when being comfortable and being safe, right? And I think people conflate the two a lot. Like, if we're having a conversation and there's psychological safety between us, which
Mm-hmm.
means I might say something, but you know in my heart that I care about you,
Right.
you'll receive it differently. But if you're focused on whether you feel comfortable or not, then we can't have those real conversations
Right.
because those are two different things. And so it's just how do we navigate that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I am on that. And so I realize that there are things that I want to expose both of my children to, that I
Mm-hmm.
want them to have. And I also realized how important it is. My wife told me the other day, she was just like, I think your son needs to spend more time with you.
Right.
He's younger. He's almost 4 years younger than my sister.
Mm-hmm.
He tries to do everything that she does.
Right.
And so I'm like, man, I don't have a problem with him playing with her toys if he happens to do so. Like my ego is, or my whole orientation to that isn't like, no, you don't do that. But
Right.
I am also understanding there are habits that I think it's helpful for him to pick up
Mm-hmm.
from me.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I take that feedback from my wife and say, okay, what do I need to do differently? Um, and there's lots to gain, right? So I'm just trying to be like, okay, I want him to be able to say, this is how we do this, and enjoy some of those things. And,
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I'm at today.
So that's I think that's good, and to be open and receptive to what your child needs, and as it ebbs and flows. Some they may need
Yeah.
more right now and might need as much later, especially in teenage years. They don't know what they need. Like,
I'm not looking forward to those years. I can tell you
Lord.
that. Oh
No.
man, please no.
But when we were talking about rather there were two parents in the home, I've also encountered. So initially, my idea when I would think of having a two-parent household, I was in that idea like, oh well, their life was perfect. They got mom and dad there. Until I became older and I witnessed some of my friends who had both parents there, but they were physically
Yeah,
there, but wasn't there for them emotionally.
yeah,
So you can have both parents, or the father could be there, or
yeah.
be there physically, but not there emotionally, which can cause
Mhm.
more friction,
Yeah,
damage.
yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And my friend Kaisi Lyman, who is a congratulations on your book, man. Heavy. He was at a book reading of his a couple weeks ago,
Hmm.
and he said something very poignant, which I really, really believe. He was just like, look, people think that, the magical black father just show up and everything is going to be all right. He's like,
Right.
nah, there's like, even if you're not putting your hands on your mom, or you don't have an alcohol
Hmm.
problem, or you're not overly, you don't do anything like just being there. There's not like an osmosis that you get in getting positive from not getting negative, right?
Hmm.
So there's action has to be taken. And so for me, like I said, I'm continuing to learn this stuff. I make mistakes all the time.
Hmm.
And I don't want anybody who's viewing this to think that I just got it made, or I just have it all figured out. I don't. I'm just continuing to try to figure out what are things I need to do differently,
Right.
because if I don't question them, then I can make the dangerous assumption that my kids are getting everything they need from me. And so if they mess up, then I can start saying, well, I did everything I could. I did more than what I received. How did this happen? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And I think that's what, when it comes down to your identity and your value system that we have,
Hmm.
it can get so caught up in, especially as parents, in the output that we get from our kids.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the things that I caution people about, and one of the books that helped me a lot, was a book called Mindset by Dweck, and she
Okay.
talks about the difference between a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Like
Ah.
understanding that, I started to praise my daughter because she's in school. My son's he's only 2, but I started to praise her for her effort. In addition to more than just saying you're smart, you're beautiful, you're brilliant, all
Right.
that
Right.
stuff. But I wanted to reinforce in her you are a hard worker, because I don't want her to crack under pressure years down the road when she has an expectation that because she is brilliant, and she's heard that her whole life from her daddy, and if she doesn't get them, she's not.
Hmm.
And that's when it gets difficult. That's a narrow causeway to traverse when you are trying to figure out why don't I get it? Because being what I've been told I have been all my life means it should come easy to me, and it's not. So something must be wrong with me, and it's like I don't want. And I'm not saying I can prevent that, but I don't. I don't want that to be her story or my son's story for that matter.
Right.
And if I can figure out a way to get them to embrace the fact that they should have a growth mindset by showing them that their father, their daddy has a growth mindset about his own thing,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe they'll get it, right? So that's my hope.
That growth mindset and fixed mindset is not a game. It's not a game at all.
Not at all.
And it's
Not at all.
continual work. It's like as
Yeah.
soon as you think you're getting a little close to peeling the onion, I'm like, but there's
Yeah.
another layer and another
Yeah.
layer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
Absolutely.
that part right there.
Absolutely.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Because I
That's
think
that's that's my hope.
if you can realize that in parenting now, because when I look at the
Yeah.
kids, I have what? I have 5 teenagers and 1 toddler. Okay. And in their brain, it's, I don't know. We were talking to our second our second youngest about college. And our rule is, you do what you're supposed to do. We'll pay for your college, but you start acting the fool,
Oh,
we're not gonna pay. Just how it's gonna go.
uh-huh.
And in his
Yeah.
mind, he was like, okay, well, if I get a scholarship, then what are you gonna give me? What? I don't. Is this a trick question? He was like, no. What are you gonna give me? You get to go to school for free, sir. That's what you're getting. He couldn't get it in his mind like we should be paying him what we would have paid for college. And I'm just like, dude, this privilege you got going on, help a sister out. Help
That's not how any of this works.
at all. They're
Yeah.
I think they're I don't know. I've had this discussion with my husband so many times. Like their work ethic is so totally completely different
Yeah.
that the things that they like, if you get honor roll, they feel like it's a big deal. I'm like, but that's what you should be doing. And I also feel that way about how people view black fatherhood. They feel like if the father just shows up, they like, oh yeah, they're there. But that's what you should be doing. So it's like
Listen.
this you know what I mean? It's like this
Yeah.
mindset or this thing that has trickled into society with just a lot of stuff. Like you should be praised for stuff that you already should be doing already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't
It,
know. I don't.
yeah.
You want a brownie point because you came to school to your child's performance. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, but so this is the way I look at things like that, right? I remember back in undergrad, campus of Howard University, every weekend we got flyers for the club.
Uh-huh.
You flyers on windshields, flyers at the dorms. You
Under
pick
your
up the
door,
flyer
everywhere.
under your door. You pick it up and you're reading it. You're like, all right, yeah, okay, all right. We check off the important things.
Right.
And one of the most important things, at least I can speak for myself and people who I associated with in undergrad, is we want to know what the dress code was. Because bare minimum is going to be what you get. If I can get in with Timbs and jeans, I'm rolling in with Timbs and jeans.
Right.
And I mean, not necessarily just me, but I think about things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you could certainly show up in a blazer and some hard bottoms and a button down and some crisp slacks on and shut the whole thing down. But it's like, nah. If they say I can get in with Tim's, I don't want to work too hard so I can get up in there.
Right.
Like, no, like let's raise the bar a little bit, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what might that look like for you to? And so when you have this, and this is one of the things I inherited from my dad. He used to say all the time growing up. He was like, "You guys always want immediate gratification or instant gratification. You need to have deferred gratification."
Mm-hmm.
I swear that was probably one of the first things I learned. I was like 4 years old saying deferred gratification. Like I'm pretty sure because that's how much I got it.
Right.
And I'm realizing the wisdom in what he used then
Mm-hmm.
is what I see now. Because to your point, we're in a society now when almost everything is immediate, and they want the praise to be as immediate as everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, but no.
Right.
You're doing the bare minimum.
Bear.
They're not going to take a picture of you and put you on the club website as somebody who was at the club that night,
Right.
because you literally, like, they take a picture of the people who were dressed to the nines. Like,
Right.
you won't be on the website. You know, stay in
Denied.
your lane. Yeah, you want bare minimum effort. What do you get? You get bare minimum reward. There you go.
But the thing is,
So
some of the reward is going to be in your children.
yes, yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
That.
think I might already have half of my speech for my daughter's wedding already written.
Really?
I think I might already have half of it already written in my head. Like, yeah, like it's. I mean, it's and the toast to my son, and like just because, and I want to be clear on this. And I hope I don't get emotional talking about this, but if I do, it's whatever. Uh, When I held my children in my hands
Mm-hmm.
when they were first born, I felt so incredibly humbled
Mm-hmm.
and so incredibly grateful. And at the same time, wondered if I was worthy enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, to me, it's like, and, I'm a Christian by faith, follower of Christ. I'm just like, God decided that I should be your parent,
Wow.
that I should be your father.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting very angry. I'm like, how could anybody look their child in the face and be like, I'm good? Like, I'm not built like that. And it was hard for me to see how anybody could be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so for me, it's a matter of saying that I have to constantly remind myself, because you get into the rigmarole of everyday life and you
Mm-hmm.
get caught up and I'm on my phone or on my iPad or I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing whatever. And then, my kids want my attention. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I need to be conscientious, put this down and give them all my attention. And sometimes I'm like, let me finish this email and I'll get back to it. And I
Right.
realize I'm not
Like,
as
wait.
consistent as I want to be, but
Mm-hmm.
I recognize it and I want to be better.
Mm-hmm.
I intend to be better. And so I set my intentions to be like, if I'm not only here, but I'm present and I listen and I extend grace, not just to them, but also to myself, so they can see how they need to be gentle with themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the world will beat you up and beat you down. And I
Mm-hmm.
always want them to know that home is always going to be a place that's going to give them grace. There's always going to be enough space for them to be authentic,
Mm-hmm.
to be who they are destined to be. I'll try my hardest, and together with my beautiful wife, who does by far the lion's share.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want anybody to think that, like, I've just got it all together. Like,
Right.
please understand, I'm a mess. Let's just get it all. I know we had all the stuff in the intro and all the stuff that I
Right.
could have done any of that if my wife wasn't supporting me.
Thank
Like, I
you,
just,
wifey. Fist bump.
let's just yeah, let me just put that out there, because I and so I'm cognizant of that. So I want my children to have a healthy perspective
Mm-hmm.
as to the types of people that they could potentially grow into, which to me is better than me. Better, much better. So
But you said something very, just the weight of what you said when you said, you know, when you held your children in your hands for the first time and you felt all of those emotions that, it was difficult for you to see how somebody could just be like, I'm good. And I think that
yeah,
I could see people doing that in a sense of them never experiencing that even as a child.
yeah,
And so it like plays out that you can just be more callous because nobody showed you that type of warmth when you first were in the world. And so I think
yeah,
it like just creates this, you know,
yeah.
Ugh, it breaks my
The
heart.
cycle of yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I think I think there's value in what you just said, and I appreciate the gift of your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I've found that people who don't get a lot of here don't do a lot of there.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
How?
Um, so when they don't give a lot of praise, when
Mm-hmm.
they're not if it's praise that they need and they don't get a lot of it, it's very hard for them to then extend grace and be thankful or because they'll perceive it as coddling. Nobody did that for me.
Right.
Why should I do that for anybody else?
Right.
And I think that's a dangerous path
Mm-hmm.
to traverse because you're doing that. You're acknowledging that you have a choice
Mm-hmm.
in what you choose to do, and you're admitting that you are purposefully choosing
To
not
do
to
it.
do it
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't done to you.
Eons ago.
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, um, okay. So does it then hold true that okay, I was abused, so I'm gonna make sure my kids are abused too? Like that sounds terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you make everything a zero sum game like that,
Mm-hmm.
like if I didn't, they won't. If I did, they will. If that is the way in which you live your life, unexamined,
Mm-hmm.
then I can already tell you how you're going to end up.
Wow.
And I don't want that for anybody.
Right.
I you know I would hope that when you become a parent, whether it's by a child that you you father or mother give birth to, adopt,
Mm-hmm.
um, take custody of, how inherit, marry into,
Mm-hmm.
however a child enters your life, into your orbit, that you would say, what is it that they need, and do I have the capacity to give it?
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't, who must I be, or who must I become in order to be able to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard.
Or if you can't become that person,
Yeah,
then you need to be able to identify
yeah,
somebody who can, serve in that area.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that takes a mature person to just say, like, hey, I don't have everything that you need,
Yeah,
but I'm willing to identify someone who can
yeah,
help either me or this in this area or help you in this area.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's real talk. I'm like, that's real. I'm like,
Yeah,
the struggle, Lord.
yeah,
Because
it's
what
real.
what it really is, it's a stretching of yourself.
Yeah,
It's a stretching and a growing of yourself for you not to be fixed and for you not to be like. I remember when I was first married and I inherited 3 children in marriage. I'm like, oh, they need me to be all these things. I don't want to. I've been
uh,
this way for years.
yeah, yeah,
I've been this way for years, and now you talk about
yeah.
changing, shifting some things.
Mm, oh man,
Oh,
man.
okay,
Yeah. Look,
okay.
people want change, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be the one to do. It's
Cause it's work.
and hell, we have for a lot. I mean, yeah, to your point, absolutely, it is work. Full stop. Period.
Full stop. Yes.
Full stop. The next thing I'm gonna say is gonna make it easier because I ain't got nothing to say to make it easier. Change is hard, and the same 5 steps in the cycle of change are the same 5 steps of grief. The same. Denial, anger,
Facts.
depression, Love
Facts!
and acceptance. The change
Facts!
and grief go through the same five
Oh my
cycles.
gosh, you are so.
And
Oh wow, that
that's
right
that's
there.
it. That's it. And you know, and it's gonna sound like I don't talk about a process. I don't. I just be talking sometimes. But when that amygdala hijack happens and we can't see anything, but you ask me to do this, we don't even realize that we become agents in maintaining the status quo
Ugh,
because we start telling ourselves a story that I'm okay the way that I am, and if I can't be accepted the way they say they do, and it's just like, again, how do you know that to be true?
right,
Because if they love me the way they say they did, or they want me to be in their life, then they wouldn't ask me to do this.
right.
I believe it's love until you confront some of that stuff. And to your point, it's kind of like there's, and I know I'm bringing in all this other stuff, but hey, it's part of what I do. It's part of my life. So I coach and I do help teams and organizations understand stuff. So like when we start looking at the diagram of like, so it's like nesting eggs. Like just imagine 3 eggs within each other, and the center of it is the comfort zone.
Right.
The outer rim is the danger zone. The middle egg, the middle one, is the learning zone.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't realize that's where you stretch into.
Mm-hmm.
People want to jump automatically. Once I leave my comfort zone, I'm in the danger zone. Not necessarily. It depends on what you're doing.
Right.
But there is you in stretching and going beyond what you're comfortable with to be open to this confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that you'll lose who you are, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It does mean that you might have to become someone, and we do it all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a almost passive thing. Because I know if I would ask you, are you the same person you were 5 years ago?
Absolutely not.
I know I'm not,
Absolutely
and
not.
and and most people will tell you they aren't.
Mm-hmm.
But and they still say, well, you know, I was doing that by myself. Well, there were circumstances that changed you. There were a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
that happened to you, and you had to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who you are at your core might still be the same, but I think that there's value in understanding that if you find someone or something
Mm-hmm.
that is worth you re-examining who you are and how you show up and the energy and impact that you have on others, I would strongly suggest that to figure out it. You know, is this better for me?
Mm-hmm.
Because as we start getting more and more technologically connected in this world, we're going to be constantly looking for connection because that's what we, as humans, we're wired to
Full
connect with one
connection.
another. We want to support one another, be around one another. We weren't created to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
But if we refuse to accommodate the changes that are coming our way, whether it's by force or or by necessity, you're going to be stuck and you're going to be alone. You're going to wonder why.
Mm. Being alone.
You
Ugh.
know.
Yeah. So, what advice or what nuggets do you have to give to fathers, you think? What's the best nugget you think that would transcend from now until eternity?
Oh, see. And hashtag no pressure. No pressure at all. Oh, man. Uh, I would love to say, you know what? I'm not, yeah, okay. So this nugget doesn't even come from me. It comes from my favorite quotes.
Okay.
Um, there was a gentleman named Jim Elliot. He, I believe he was a missionary. He has a quote. He says, he is no fool, and I'm going to put a caveat to say he should be inclusive as possible, is no fool who learns to give what he, she, or they cannot keep in order to gain what
Mm-hmm.
he, she, or they cannot lose. Now I'm going to come back out and just say it straight. so it's not as confusing.
Thank you.
He is no fool. No, I mean,
I got
I'm
you.
conscientious of stuff. So he's no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is kind of going back, the stories that we tell ourselves, the words that we use, the things that we believe to be true, the limiting self-beliefs, the all those things. And we ask ourselves, to our earlier point we talked about earlier, if it's serving us. And the question is, if it's not serving us, what must we let go of? Because only by letting go of those things can we gain those things that we don't have access to by remaining the way that we are.
Right.
And once we gain those things that we cannot lose, because we have to kind of peel back to borrow an earlier saying, you go back later down and to really question, like, do I have everything? Like, be transparent as you can with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
If you ain't have it, tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them that you're working hard. Tell them that you are trying. Be vulnerable. And I know that's hard.
That right there?
I know it's like
that.
Look, I'm telling you, you can't grow into the person you need to be if you put your flag on a hill of pride. You will never become who you could be.
Mm-hmm.
You just won't. You are blocking yourself from gaining access to realizations and understanding and people who could open doors for you and clear ways for you, and hold a mirror up to you like, look, if you want to get to the next level of affection, of relationship, of understanding, you might have to self-examine a little bit more.
A lot more.
And be vulnerable and be real. Like, it's not easy. Let me tell you, it's not easy.
But it's so worth it.
It is. It absolutely is.
It's work in the beginning, but once the oil start going a little bit, it gets a little easier. But it's still work.
After it becomes habit, yeah.
For sure. Wow. So what is one thing that people would say was weird or awkward about you, but you turned it into a strength?
Weird or awkward? Well, I don't know well, maybe it is. I think in some ways, I've always had, I've always been a little bit empathic. And I think that kind of showed up in the way that I wrote and performed it. And I would always get people who came up to me and would say, I feel like you wrote that for me. Like, explain it exactly the way I'm trying to figure out how to explain it. And I don't know who put it in your head. But that's it. And I think there's a lot of value in that for me. I think just the gift that God gave me with words. You
are wordsmith. I be like, how'd you get that? Love it.
It's like, you said that. My wife was so bad at our wedding. Oh my gosh. When I was saying my vows, my wife was like, all these women was like,
Yes. Yes.
Oh man. I hit it with that Jay-Z. What do you want me to do? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, where does that come from? And I can only just say that, that's one of my gifts, and I want to make sure I keep it, don't lose it, and use it. So people have been like, when you said, um, I gave you what I could at the time, but you required more. And I know it's ironic that I found the courage only after you found the door.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, when you just said that, that was like my last relationship, my life, and that's just what it is,
Yes.
you know. And I'm like,
I think there's another business in here. I think that what was it, that movie, Will Smith?
oh, Hitch.
Yes. That you could give guys like
Yeah,
just say these words and it's over.
I probably could. I
And
probably
you know,
could. I
yes,
probably could.
indeed.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anybody is watching this and you want
Exactly.
some words,
Fathers out there,
inbox me.
exactly. You need
Oh
words
man.
with help, what heartfelt vulnerability, empathy,
Yeah.
all of those things.
Yeah.
You don't even gotta wait no more. So how do you inspire people?
Oh man.
Excuse me.
Say it again.
How do you inspire people?
Man. I hope I do so by um like I hope that my words and my actions match.
Mm-hmm.
I I talk a lot about. I think once I get to the ultimate, the penultimate point of self actualization,
Mm-hmm.
will be when my intent and my impact are the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, um, I have I've just started to accept, and I know I have probably some really close friends of mine who might be watching this and be like, "Oh, I've been telling you that for decades." That um, that I have an impact on people, a positive impact on people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's constantly reinforced when I go back to Howard for homecoming, and I'll see a friend who I was a campus pal or their RA, or I
Right.
wrote something in the Hilltop, or they heard me perform, and they've seen me on social media, and they've seen the man that I'm still growing
Right.
into, and they say, you know what, I really appreciate what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I admire the man that you're becoming. Um, you know, and like, but the biggest thing for me is when I wrote that article
Mm-hmm.
for blacklove.com, and I just want to shout out Cody Oliver for giving me that platform to even do that. Like, I knew that it was positive when my dad was just like, he asked me several times to send him the link so he can share it with his friends.
Wow.
Like, that's big. It's so big for me. Like, I'm like, man, like, I made it.
Right.
Because
Daddy, I made
being,
it.
yeah, it's that's major because I want. Um, I just hope that I have a positive impact on people, and I know that was big for me. Yeah.
Well, I will say, and I'm sure I speak for 1,000,001 of your followers. Like, there's a reason why I call you professor. I'm like, you are a teacher, like, hands down. Like, when you post something on social media, rather it's a new book find, rather it's some word that I had no idea existed, and you just put it in so eloquently. I'm like, come on, professor, give it to me. Come on. I mean, your light just shines in what you do in terms
I
of you
appreciate that.
being a husband, being an educator,
Yeah,
being serious about your craft, going after it. I mean, it speaks volumes. And I think uh, you being who you are, even though I don't know your father personally, I feel like I know him because I see just from the article characteristics in you, and also the other characteristics that you are strengthening to grow to be better, so that from one generation to another it expands in a positive way.
yeah, yeah,
I say all that to say I want to say thank you so much for coming on, and you will always
yeah.
I already know that you're going to be a doctorate and you're going to be teaching somewhere. I already know that. So I don't know if you
Okay.
know that yet, but I know that you know that. I know that I'm going to be attending some conferences that you are going to be putting on and speaking at. I already know these things. So I'm just letting you
Okay.
know I'm rooting for you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And hopefully everybody who
Thank
watched
you
got
for having me.
nuggets about fatherhood. Follow Olu. He has words. He'll teach you how to cut people in a great way with your
I
words.
don't know. No, you just always use your powers for good.
Yes.
Always.
But
Always.
just like your father,
But
also,
every once in a while,
yeah,
you
just
gotta
like your
show them.
father, you could get these hands
Yeah,
and these feet. You can get these words.
man.
Okay?
Yeah, you can. You can. You're right. You're absolutely right. See, it's the balance. It's the both and, right? You can. I say sometimes. Sometimes I always say, oh, because they rhyme. I was like, I try to give people the Renoir, but sometimes they need to get the abattoir.
Yeah.
And that's just, that's just Renoir art, and abattoir is a slaughterhouse.
Right.
Just a fancy way of saying it. But that just depends on what the mood is, and if, people haven't come in. But I try. I try very hard to, you know,
We
to
appreciate your
be who I
trying
know I'm
and
supposed
we
to
enjoy your trying.
be.
Enjoy
I
it
appreciate that.
wholeheartedly.
I'm
Wholeheartedly.
sure you do.
I be like, for the win.
Okay, I
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yes, but
I
thank you once
appreciate
again
that.
for everybody tuning in. Same time next. Oh no, we're not doing this next week because it's the week of Thanksgiving, and I'll be in Florida.
Yeah.
19th is my anniversary, so that's not a video you want to see.
Oh. Oh.
Anniversary time.
Enjoy. All
Yes.
right.
All right. So I'll see you guys on the 26th. Is that the 26th? That next Monday
I
afterwards?
think so.
Yeah, the
I
20th.
believe so. All
I'll see you.
right. All right.
All right. Thanks so much.
Well, I'll see you. Thank you. Take care. All right.
Peace.
Peace.
Ra.